You weren't always able to buy these beautiful African cichlids in America. The story of how they got here in this FinCast. Be that as it may, I want to continue with my series of interviews and discussions with Rick Birrell, one of the pioneers in the African cichlid aspect of our hobby. Rick has appeared in several FinCasts, and you'll be seeing more of him throughout the year. But he operates a major tropical fish farm in Florida. He supplies the aquarium trade with a high percentage of the African cichlids that you can buy in stores. And this is where they developed the extreme aquatic food, which is just amazing for bringing out the colors of the cichlids and other fish as well, for that matter. And I'll be talking more about how they develop the food. That's coming up in a future FinCast. But the more I interview and talk with Rick, the more I'm amazed that I'm actually talking to the guy, or certainly one of the guys, who brought African cichlids to the United States. Rick and his brother had just graduated from college, and they decided to take a trip to Africa. Here's Rick.
My brother and I were heavy-duty hobbyists in 1970. Both of us were attending Florida State University, and each of us had multiple tanks in our apartments, and we just couldn't get anything but the most common of African. So as on a lark, we said, well, why don't we bring in a shipment? So we formed a company, called ourselves Tally Imports, a name off Tallahassee and Imports, and we brought in our first shipment of Malawi fish, which was about a 12-box shipment from Peter Davies, who was one of the first original shippers of African cichlids. We did that in Tallahassee for about 6 months. Our homes became basically 80, 90 tanks, and we lived on couches. At that point, we moved to a warehouse. And when we graduated, we couldn't get the variety we wanted, so when we graduated, we took off for Malawi in 1973, and we flew over there with anticipation of talking Mr. Davies into catching more of the lake, and we were going to start bringing in more fish. When we got there, we found out that he wasn't really interested in moving into other parts of the lake. We were very disillusioned, and we're leaving town, and we were in Blantyre, and we happened to pass a fish shop. And it was funny, we thought it was kind of funny that he had goldfish and mollies and swordtails here in Malawi, Africa. So we walked in, and looking around, he did have all these common fish, which we weren't interested in. But in the back of the shop, he had some of the most beautiful Malawi cichlids, and we just actually, our jaws dropped. But it was a man who's never, his name was Eric Fleet. He had never shipped before, but he owned a permit for the entire lake. So it was like we found this guy. We started working with him, started talking to him, and over the next 2 or 3 trips back to Africa, we taught him how to ship fish, and we started bringing in multiple different areas of the lake. We traveled to Lacoma Island, started that island up. We traveled up the Sherry River and started bringing in commercial quantities of linii and morii and hapcompressiceps, and all the fish. We had soon picked up another shipper, Richard Furzer, in the Mozambique side, and we were bringing in red zebras, white zebras. We were naming all these fishes. We were bringing them in, not scientific, just fun names for us. And then we also ended up with Stuart Grant, who ended up being the biggest supplier as the years went by. But this is how we got our start, a 20-year-old and 21-year-old guy sitting in Africa out of the clear blue.
That's a little bit of my interview with Rick, and I thought I asked him about this on camera, but he told me the story about the day they arrived in Africa and rented a small car at the airport. Couldn't find a hotel, it was late, so they parked next to a body of water. It was a river, a pond, a lake, something like that. And unbeknownst to them, hippos live in that body of water. And if you don't know, hippos can be dangerous. And when the locals found out where they had stayed that night, they told them they were lucky to be alive, because hippos have a tendency to, I guess, be aggressive. And that small car would have been no match for the hippos had they decided that they didn't like that small car parked next to the body of water. But be that as it may, Rick and Andy survived, but it's just a great story. And so when I talk about cichlid adventures, that's kind of what I was thinking. This was not easy to do back in the day. It's not easy to be a pioneer. So we'll have more with Rick coming up. Of course, we've already done several interviews, and he's a great resource on how to take care of cichlids. So please click the button and you can take a look at some of the other interviews that I've done with Rick, and we'll have more cichlid adventures in the future. By the way, I just wanted to say congratulations once again to Beth and my son Jonathan, the newlyweds, and by all means, if you haven't subscribed to Fincasters, please hit the subscribe button now, and I'll see you in the next Fincast.